This is The Road Show, and I'm your host, David Warren. Well, it's that time of year again, time to put on a sweater and time to talk about the oldest continuously published periodical in North America, the Old Farmer's Almanac. Joining us for the second time is Carol Conair, the newest editor of the Almanac and the 14th editor since it began back in 1792. The new 2025 edition of the OFA is now available, and as expected, we'll give you a full roadshow review. So let's get started by welcoming back Carol Conair. Carol, what a treat to have you back with us.
Oh, thanks for letting me be on again. It's my favorite subject, and you're a wonderful host.
Well, thank you. You had just started as editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac. You're no stranger to publishing, but you've been there about a year, so how would you describe your first year in the big chair?
It was so fun, and of course it's a real team effort, but my colleagues, my fellow editors, are really a blast. They are just naturally curious people and very multi-talented. So we've had fun. I think that's what we set out to do, to put even more fun into the pages, and I hope you're finding that in the 2025 edition.
Well, speaking of fun, what would you say the funnest part of being an editor is?
Ooh. Well, I think most people can relate to the recipe testing day when we all test the recipes and bring them in to share.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful day.
I bet.
But I think it's also just ideas. And again, kind of going back to that curiosity that is age old. You know, I'm a gardener, so I love to talk about gardening. I love to write about gardening and read about it. And that's just about every day on the job. So that, for me, is the most fun.
Well, you mentioned last year that you had worked for Yankee Publishing, which is the parent company of the Old Farmer's Almanac. You worked for the company many years ago and then went to do other things, and then you are what's called a boomerang employee. You boomeranged back, and now you're at the helm at the Old Farmer's Almanac. So tell us a little bit about your background in publishing.
Sure, yeah. I was a young editor when I was first at, not that I'm old, like the Old Farmer's Almanac, but I was in my 30s when I first worked at Yankee Publishing on the Yankee magazine side. That's a wonderful regional magazine that's also been around for a very long time. So I definitely knew my home region like the back of my hand, and really got great training in terms of also editing stories and story ideas. Then I spent almost 2 decades at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, a good old agricultural college from the beginning, and most of my time there was at the library and working closely with the archives, which is almost similar to what we tend to do here at the Almanac. We're always looking backward and forward, and I think that's true for a library too. You're always trying to preserve and curate the record and make it available to people, and also have, you know, things that are modern and really just being published so that people also have the latest information. So that turned out to be great training for the job I have now.
Well, I wondered how much publishing had changed in your 2 decades away from being an editor. So has it changed much, or is it pretty much the same?
Well, I did a lot of publications while at UMass Amherst too. So, but I think, you know, in terms of commercial publishing and publishing in higher ed are very different. I think some has changed, and some things have really persisted. I think the digital world, you know, took us all by storm, and, you know, there's been so many predictions like print is going to go away. But the truth is that people have really turned to print in a stronger way for certain things.
Yes.
We know people want to get that, you know, quick find an answer when they're on their digital devices, or, you know, when they're on their mobile, or really just looking for an answer versus looking for knowledge, you know, or a deeper read, or thinking about things. That tends to happen more on the print side. So I think over time I've seen a lot of different iterations of that, and then really trying to understand the consumer. You know, they want to visit us on different channels, but they don't want the same thing. They don't want to see the Almanac features really on the web. They want to know when to plant their peas.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's something Americana about the Old Farmer's Almanac that you really want something in your hand versus just running to your computer or smart device. There's something about having an almanac in print form, would you not say?
Absolutely, and I don't think it hurts our business that phones are pretty big these days. We're not much bigger than one of those big phones, not quite a tablet, but that turns out that's a very handy size. And, certainly we have information in our book every year, things like planting tables and best days and tides and sunrises and sunsets. And you could jump to the web and find those things, but you won't find them all on the same page telling you that's what's happening today, this day of the year, as well as we're out of our minds, right? Long-range forecasting well more than a year in advance. And you don't find that almost anywhere today. You don't find long-range forecasts.
And we're going to find out about this year's forecasts coming up for this next year of 2025 here in just a bit. But Carol, I made a little boo-boo online because I order my almanac every year, the Old Farmer's Almanac. In my mind, there's only one almanac. But I went on Amazon and ordered it and just looked at the picture and saw that it was yellow. And then when it arrived, it's this huge book. And I must have ordered the easy-to-read softcover edition. But I think, and by the way, I bought a second one, which is smaller that I'm used to. But I'm going to save the big one and gift it for Christmas. So that's my idea.
That is brand new this year, David, and it's by request. I'm sorry that you got the wrong one, but I'm sure someone's going to love it. We often look at that when we're doing radio interviews because the pages are easy to read, as you said, especially those calendar pages, people who like the everyday calendar, and you can read, the feast days and where the moon is and certain quirky things and poetry all on one page. That's kind of a nice feature. So I'm hoping you'll find a good audience for that. But yes, we had great demand for a large print edition, so we offered it this year.
I wear glasses, Carol, and I can tell you that I would not need my glasses for this big version, but I do for the one I'm holding in my hand. And I want to flip immediately to my favorite part because I have a background in journalism, so I always love to read the letter from the standing editor to the patrons. In this case, it's now you. Janice Stillman had written last year's because it was right at the cusp of you guys changing positions. So this was your first letter to the patrons. I'm going to read just a little bit from what you wrote and get your feedback. You did write, "As centuries pass, we note the steadfastness of readers' interests. Articles in 1825 concerned raising calves, growing asparagus, and keeping a kitchen garden. A century later, we describe the hazards of rearing chicks, how to thwart houseflies, and the 7 best woods for fence posts. Now, our new 2025 offerings seem reassuringly familiar, such as how to raise backyard chickens, grow plants from outside your hardiness zone, and garden in sync with the moon." And Carol, you say, "We appreciate feedback and are delighted to hear from friends." So what kind of feedback do you typically receive?
Well, that's our secret sauce, really, is that we do hear from readers. I get letters. We also get letters and submissions for our essay contests and our recipes. We get those, too, which is really fun to get mail. But then we also have, on almanac.com, you can, respond on a page. You can make a comment, and we also have, a reader query site that we do answer those questions. And also, you mentioned the big A, the Amazon. We go on there and we look and see what people are saying in their reviews. It's so important for us. I think that's why we're here, so long, so many years, is we listen to the readers. So what do they tell us? Yeah, they tell us a lot of things. Like, I had a great reader response saying, "Your trends need more citations. You're just talking about these things." And what's really funny is they're right, because we do such rigorous fact-checking and require sources for everything. Why aren't we citing those? So that was, we can improve all the time, something simple. But, overwhelmingly what we hear from our readers is they want to grow stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They want to grow food. They want to grow some really pretty plants, too. But they want to do it economically. And they want the old ways because those often work. But they also want to know if there's something new they ought to be trying.
And it's something I'm sorry to interrupt there, but I want to...
No, that sums it up.
We're trying to be too kind to each other here. I want to mention that you did a very nice thing for me last year. You said during the program, and you came through right away, you sent me the almanac from the previous 100 years and then the previous 200 years. So, for example, and I believe you can get this on almanac.com. The new 2025 almanac is available wherever books are sold, newsstands, also almanac.com, and by calling 1-800-ALMANAC. But then you also have a gift set, if you'd like to do it this way, where you will mail with the 2025, you mail the 1925 almanac, as it was back 100 years ago, and the 1825 almanac from 200 years ago, just to compare and maybe see how many things are similar between the three almanacs. Great idea.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, we do go back and use these old treasures and see what, I wrote my letter based on that. There's so many things we can feel maybe uncertain about if we choose to, but it's really, really heartening, I think, for people to know that the same kind of challenges that are our day-to-day, like, do I want to have backyard chickens, are still plaguing us a few hundred years later.
The founder of the Almanac back in 1792 was Robert B. Thomas. His drawing is on the cover because you have kept consistent with the covers since back then, and I don't even know when the camera was invented, but I'm assuming after 1792. I'll have to look that up. That'll be fact-checked for sure after this program. But also on the cover you have Benjamin Franklin. Obviously, Robert B. Thomas needed to be on the cover, but why did Benjamin Franklin get such a place of prominence on this Old Farmer's Almanac?
That's a wonderful question. Well, he was really the father of almanacs in this country. He had Poor Richard's Almanac. And so in the tradition of almanacs and the early almanacs, people copied each other. They were presenting some of the same information about the stars and the moon, things that planters wanted to know about and about the seasons. And so that stuff was uniform in a way. And then what would happen was each printer or each almanac editor would have put their spin on it, and so I think for us, we think about the founding. Yes, we are the oldest published periodical, but we give credit to Benjamin Franklin, who really brought the almanac and really made it an American thing. There, of course, are European ones, but really he's the father of the almanac in this country.
Carol, in a way, we have similar positions with me being the program director for the Oasis Radio Network, because we have a mandate here for our programming, and everything has to fit within that mandate. And then the mandate there where you work, that was founded by Robert B. Thomas, was and is to be useful with a pleasant degree of humor. And I'm sure you get a lot of great contributions and ideas from people, but that must be the lens that you say yes as an editor for everything that makes it into the publication. Do I have that correctly?
Absolutely. It's a wonderful mission, and I'll tell you, it's not the easiest. It's not about really necessarily being yuckity yuck funny, but it's about what kind of tickles our sense of joy, which is a little different, right? And kind of it might be a clever turn of phrase that makes someone smile. I think the smile is really what we want people to end with. And often we smile when we learn something. So it's kind of this two sides of the same coin, I think, and it is the lens through which we look at everything.
A great example of that is an article that my sound man and I will read after we say goodbye to you here in just a bit, Carol, and that is from the New Almanac, and the article is called Snug as a Bug in a Hug. All right, that put a smile on my face when I saw that. And it's something that we're going to tell you about, listeners, when we come back here in a bit. But coming up next, after this break, Carol and I will do our annual Almanac flip-through, in which the Almanac has predicted trends for 2025. What's going to happen? We'll tell you after this. I'm David Warren here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world.
There's food for the hungry, joy for the sad. I found an oasis of love. Oasis Network.
Well, the tradition continues. This is another Almanac Roadshow that I have been doing for, I'm going to say, about 3 decades now every year. David Warren here, your host, and I have had 3 different editors over these last 30 years that I've done this, and our latest and greatest is Carol Conair. She just joined about a year ago. She is the 14th editor since 1792 at the Old Farmer's Almanac, and she is the 2nd female editor. So congratulations again to you, Carol, on the position that you hold. Okay, so the 2025 edition is out, and it is number 233 since 1792. And starting a while back, maybe I would assume you know this, how long ago did you guys start putting trends into the Almanac every year?
I think that's probably, and this is kind of funny because I think that's really recent. I'm going to say maybe the last 25 years.
Okay.
I mean, there was always trends even in the first Almanac, but they weren't said to be trends, but, sort of what's on the horizon. So it's a tradition from the beginning, but I think sort of packaged like this, a couple decades.
All right, so here we are on page 6 as we kick off 2025 trends, and we start where we should start, and that is on the farm. And it says, a new wave of young agriculture specialists will have a keen understanding of AI, artificial intelligence. An engineering degree may be just as relevant as a traditional degree from an agricultural college. And that's your area of expertise. So it looks like AI is making its way onto our farms, Carol.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. And also, I would say, well, first of all, yes, AI is coming to farms. Things like in an integrated pest management situation, we've always been an organic, advocate, but on these commercial farms, but they could use far less of an agent, say, because it could be very targeted. Also, for pulling weeds, you could use AI because if people like me who go around taking snapshots of plants and figuring out what they are if I don't know them, so can a camera on a farm running down a row and just pulling the noxious weeds, for instance, versus the plants.
Wow.
So there's that. Also, we're weather watchers, and AI, it can provide some models for weather. So, yeah, there's a lot of ways it can be used, but I think an exciting kind of flip side of this is that this is one way in which young people can hang on to the family farm. It's like maybe they're interested, they want to get a degree, but now there's this science they'd like to apply to their own, maybe a legacy farm. Mm-hmm. Because, one of the issues we see is that there aren't generations continuing. But, a kid nowadays might be like, hey, I'm really into AI. Wow, it has farming applications, So that's pretty cool, too.
Yes, and we welcome all young farmers. I know that comes from you as well, Carol. By the numbers on the farm, 1.9 million is how many farms and ranches there are in the United States. There are over 150,000 farms and ranches using renewable energy, such as solar panels. Let's look here. 296,000 and some producers are under the age of 35. 58% of farms have at least one female decision maker, and 463 is the average number of acres on a farm or ranch. Okay, regarding the farm, still on this topic, there will be more home deliveries in this next year, Carol. Dairy farmers are delivering milk to homes and collecting glass bottles for reuse with online ordering and flexible delivery times. So that's kind of old-fashioned meets new world in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing it also in the restaurant realm. Restaurants partnering. We talk about this partnering with growers, and this is an idea about farms diversifying. They're diversifying not only maybe moving away from monoculture, but they're diversifying their income streams. They're finding ways to sell direct to consumers, whether that's me and you or say a restaurant, and really becoming partners. And part of this is people want stuff delivered. They might have one of those grocery services. Well, this is an old way, as you say, that we could provide new competition.
Last year, Carol, you were at the point of moving back. You had gotten the position at the Old Farmer's Almanac, but you were still living in Massachusetts. So now you're, I believe, in New Hampshire living, where the Old Farmer's Almanac is based. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. So do you have a garden where you live?
Oh, boy, something amazing happened. I have a garden. I'm a traditional vegetable gardener. However, the property that I bought from the previous owner, who is now a friend, was planted with a permaculture, basically a fruit orchard.
Wow.
And not traditional, not like apples. In fact, there aren't any apples. But there's a lot of other things. So there's things like shrub berries, gooseberries, and goomy berries, something I never heard of. Your blueberries and raspberries, yes, but I have sour cherry trees and pawpaw trees. So I am learning. I am a new gardener in this realm, and it's been amazing.
Wow. How do you have time to do all that?
I don't.
Ah.
But I find time. I'm drawn out there. Yeah, it's definitely more than a hobby. But that and my dog takes up a lot of time.
I'm going to ask about Jack here in just a bit. But speaking about the garden, many people are looking for vegetables and herbs that they can grow in smaller spaces. There's a significant increase in the popularity of what are called dwarf plants. And there's a new buzzword in gardening, edimentals, plants that are both edible and ornamental. Very cool. All right, so where do our gardeners grow? According to the 2025 edition of the Old Farmer's Almanac, our gardeners grow 75% in a yard, 30% on a balcony, 21% indoors, and 2% in community gardens. And then what do our gardens grow? Well, 76% grow flowers, 55% vegetables, 50% houseplants, and 30% fruit trees. And that's where you come into the equation, Carol. All right, let's jump over to page 13 and tell us what's new in eating.
Oh, this is really fun. I think we've all gotten used to QR codes, but now instead of traditional menus, we're seeing holographic images of food items projected onto tables. And so you can get this 3D view of a dish before you order it. Though I would say sometimes I just look what my neighbors got and say, what did they get? So that's a 3D view also.
It's better than 3D.
Right? But again, we're seeing AI come into our food, in terms of like grocery stores. They can determine a risk or like if there's any kind of, date on an item, like they can have a quicker way to do those things and keep us safer. So yeah, there's lots of things lots of trends. And of course, we all love food.
I want to read just a smidge here. Grocery stores are using AI to determine the risk of an item expiring before sold, marking down items accordingly and alerting people, as you mentioned, Carol, but via an app that the food is about to expire. So a bargain shopper can hightail it to the grocery store and get the food at a discount. Very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. All right. So by the numbers regarding eating, most people's dinner time in the U.S. is 6:19 p.m. I don't know if you're even home from the office at that point, Carol. 68% is the percentage of discarded food that is still edible. That is a sad fact. And then 21% of restaurant diners admit to splitting entrees to save money. Okay, let's move on to our animal friends and tell us about the dog that's very popular these days.
The French Bulldog. So the French Bulldog, we write, has been steadily rising in popularity and finally eclipsed the Labrador Retriever. The love for Frenchies shows no sign of stopping as their adaptability, portability, and friendly disposition make them irresistible.
Well, you have a dog, as we learned last year, named Jack, and he is a pit bull mix. How did he do with the move to New Hampshire?
He's doing great. We don't have the luxury we had before of living up against wilderness so that he could really roam as he pleases. But he has a nice we have this orchard I talked about, and right around the corner are great places to hike. There's a waterfall, and another corner there's a reservoir with a dam, and so he's been exploring all kinds of new places.
We have touched on AI, artificial intelligence, a couple of times already in trends for 2025, but now it's making it into the pet world. So what are your thoughts on that, Carol?
Yes, as we write, we've got things, AI-powered robots, again, are now able to learn an animal's behavior, try to calm it down or dispense treats. Smart collars can track their movements, just like for people, sleep, heart rate, appetite, and bark. Things like pet doors can be programmed to be opened for specific pets or linked to a chip on their collar. So all kinds of things to make our pets more comfortable.
All right. We're talking about trends for 2025 from the Old Farmer's Almanac. This is an annual tradition we do on the Roadshow each year, and we're going to flip over to page 18 and find out what's going on around the house. When it comes to colors, we're going to see beiges, creamy off-whites, and rich browns, so warm neutrals for our homes. And something that people are doing, now, if you're painting your walls beige or white, this isn't such a big deal, but if you like color, this is interesting. People are painting an entire room, the ceiling, the trim, the walls, all one color. I don't know what I think about that, Carol. That's a lot of color.
I haven't done that, and I wonder about that too. I mean, I've seen certainly an all-white room, and maybe there's just something soothing about that. I think the overall trend we are talking about is people, we've had a very rocky real estate market, but people are really nesting wherever they are. And of course, many people work some of their hours from home, and so they want these places, their homes to be nice and soothing.
Well, when you're looking for that perfect chair or end table and you're just not finding it at the furniture store, well, now there is 3D printed furniture, so you just have to have it in your mind, and I don't know how that works, Carol, but I think that's pretty cool.
Yes, where I worked before at the library, we had 3D printers. You can print anything in tables and lamps and things. And of course, this is the digital world coming into our homes. I like this wonderful trend, augmented reality walls. You could have wallpaper that changes color or show your favorite images or artwork. So that's kind of a fun thing too.
Over on page 20, we're moving on to the culture changes for 2025, and it looks like it's all about togetherness. Shared neighborhood space is going to be big. Gardens, pools, workspaces are all becoming more popular, and I love this, especially coming through a political year. We're becoming kinder as a culture. 17% of respondents have paid someone else's bill. 19% of American flyers have given up their seat to someone else during the previous 3 months, and the list goes on. And then some top places where U.S. adults see acts of kindness: in the grocery store, places of worship, at home, and in the neighborhood. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up here, but we've got a couple more things we want to cover. Money matters, over on page 22. Again, with this being an election year, we heard a lot about money. So what's the culture going to be like in regard to currency this next year?
Well, we say consumers are buying experiences instead of more stuff, buying less stuff overall. There's a real minimalist mindset that we're seeing, all over the place. And I think, I've seen this in the news too. They're budgeting for things like travel as well as retirement, but looking at all kinds of ways to save money, and do more. So this idea that stuff isn't serving us as much as maybe being together or seeing something new.
All right, here on page 22, and I think we'll end with this, Carol. Tell us about the top states in which people are retiring based on affordability, well-being, health care, weather, and low crime.
Yes, let's talk about it. Number 1, Iowa. Number 2, Delaware. 3, West Virginia. 4, Missouri. And 5, Mississippi.
All right, wonderful. Well, I'm David Warren, talking by phone with the editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac, Carol Conair. When we come back on today's program, we're going to give you this winter's and next summer's for 2025, the forecasts for our various listening areas. Now, you've heard me say it for many years, in fact decades, that the OFA boasts of an 80% accuracy rate with its weather forecasting. Carol and I will talk about that right after this.
The Road Show is a listener favorite which airs each weekday here on the Oasis Radio Network starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Road Show also has a great section on our website, oasisnetwork.org. There you'll find audio archives of select past interviews, plus guest lineup and contact information, and links to our Road Show sponsors and its host. So join us for The Road Show, whether on your radio, computer, or mobile device at oasisnetwork.org.
On today's program, it's Almanac Day, and when I say Almanac, I mean the Old Farmer's Almanac, and the 2025 edition is now available at bookstores, newsstands, almanac.com, or by calling the toll-free number 1-800-ALMANAC. And back with us again this year is Carol Conair. She's the newest and the 14th editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac since 1792. And so I got out my calculator, Carol, and since you are the 14th, I thought, well, Carol's just been there 1 year, so let's, instead of 233 years now, let's make it 232 years and divide it by 13, because there have been 13 editors before you. And the average length as an editor is 18 years, my friend.
I know it.
So you have
You
have at least 17 more to go. So,
that's right.
So 17 falls and holiday times with yours truly, David Warren, here on the Oasis Radio Network, and I look forward to every single one of them. Well, you talked about a really fun part of your job earlier. What would you say the most challenging part is?
Oh, for sure, weather. I think that anybody who puts things in the ground and hopes to see them grow has felt there's a lot of changes afoot. And so I think, we do predict the weather, and it's changing. And we know that both the U.S. and Canadian meteorological services, they've released their new normals. We're actually running a story about it in the 2026 issue. What are those normals? Why do we keep changing them? And the idea is that, we want to be talking about trends now. So it's not that helpful to compare to 100 years ago, say. But I think that's really been the big thing is weather. There's been a lot of extreme weather, and growers especially feel it. So finally, of course, the hardiness zones also changed, and about half the country moved into a half-warmer zone.
Wow. Well, the word almanac means calendar of the heavens. And wasn't that the original intent of the almanac when it started back in 1792, that people wanted to know information that the heavens were telling them, such as planning by the moon phases, et cetera, the calendar pages?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. You probably had the Bible in the house and this book, and if you were in maybe more of a urban area, you might have had a broadsheet or some kind of a printed news once in a while. So, yes, there was need for something for every day of the year, both to entertain but to inform. And what, of course, at that time were people doing? Every other person was a farmer, essentially. We're growing our own food. And so we didn't have meteorologists. We didn't have even short-term weather predicting, but the need to know. And also, we know people needed a leg up. It's not like you can go to your grocery store if your cucumbers don't work out. And so the idea that, gardening in sync with the moon gave growers an edge. That if they understood how a full moon can affect temperatures and growth patterns versus a new moon, that was going to be helpful, and still is.
I find all that very, very fascinating. Carol, before we give the forecast for 2025, how can a publication such as yours, how can you predict the weather that far out, and remind us how many months in advance you start before the predictions are coming?
I know, it's really, especially when, short-range meteorologists don't get it right very often.
Exactly.
Right? What are we thinking? But again, as you alluded to, David, it's about the stars. Our founder, Robert B. Thomas, was an astronomer, and he was particularly fascinated with the magnetic storm cycles of the sun. And that's 11-year cycles. We just hit peak of 25. So there's many folks seeing the aurora a lot further south. That's a result of those magnetic storms. And they peak and then they go down. And so we're at peak. And so the next 11 years we'll see less activity over time. It's not like there's a solar storm and we have a hot summer. It's just that it affects things that affect our weather. And so that's what we use. We use three things: climate data, meteorology, and the science of sunspots. And that together is what gives our long-range forecast. We're looking for those patterns that are age-old.
Well, here's the forecast for our FM listening areas across the country for winter 2024 into 2025. For Tulsa and Oklahoma City, we will have mild and dry conditions this winter. For the Ozarks, mild and snowy. For our Ohio listeners, cold and dry. And for our Virginians listening, mild and snowy. Now, before I give the forecast for summer of 2025, I want to mention that last year's accuracy rate from the Old Farmer's Almanac for predicting temperatures was 44%. Now, wait a minute. For precipitation, it was 83% accurate for an overall accuracy rate of 64%, which is a little bit down from 70% this last year and lower than the traditional average rate of 80%. But based on the fact they're doing this months and months in advance, I want to give a shout out and a congratulations to meteorologists Bob Smerbeck and Brian Thompson, and I know you would echo that, Carol.
They are amazing, and they are in a tricky world. You know, we meet with them frequently. We talk to them all the time because we're always talking about the weather and what do they see. And, of course, yes, we work on those. We'll get their initial predictions for the 2026 Almanac. We'll get those in January and February, and even into March. They'll be tweaking them. Really until probably April, and then we go to press in June because, you know, printing a few million almanacs takes a while. So that's the timeline for them. That's the very last piece of the book to come in. We give them the most time that we can, and then we work with them heavily on it. It's kind of like we bring in almost everything else we can, and then we do the weather.
Even in a year when the averages are down a little bit, they are still 2/3 accurate, predicting 12 months in advance. And I don't know that our local meteorologists on TV get it right regarding tomorrow's forecasts.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so here is the forecast for our FM listening areas for summer of 2025. For Tulsa and Oklahoma City, plus for the Ozarks, hot and dry. For our Ohio listeners, hot and rainy. And for Virginians tuned in, hot and dry for summer of 2025. Well, I'm David Warren, and my special guest on today's Roadshow is the editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac, Carol Conair. After this break, we're going to announce this year's winners of the annual recipe and essay contests. Back after this. I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show. It's Almanac Day on the Roadshow. I'm David Warren, your host, and we are discussing the 2025 edition of the Old Farmer's Almanac, which is available at bookstores, newsstands, by calling 1-800-ALMANAC, and by going to almanac.com. And Carol, there are a whole lot of other things you can do on almanac.com besides buy an almanac. What would you say are the highlights of your website?
Oh, I think there's just some great tools on there for our weather nut friends. You can put your zip code in and get both that long-range forecast, but a 60-day forecast. Again, we're always working with our weather folks on that. And then for those growers, put in your zip code on our planting page, and you'll get all kinds of information about when you can plant what, according to the frost dates of your region. So those are just super fun tools. But I think people do love our recipes online, and, I think the really quick, very well-researched information on any kind of plant that we have online, whether it's a house plant or you're trying carrots this year or, what is going on with my hydrangea.
All right, let's announce the 2024 recipe contest winners here on page 74. And the contest for 2024 was all about your best holiday recipe. And I got to tell you that I am very tempted as I look at this first prize winner, which this person received $300. Congratulations. Tell us what the winning recipe was, Carol.
Oh, these are amazing. Red, white, and blueberry cheesecake bars. So you could use them for a variety of holidays.
Yes, actually, it looks like cheesecake that it's got fresh fruit marbled into it and then kind of a fruit glaze on top. And you were...
They're not hard. That's a great, easy recipe.
All right, so good for your teeth if you don't like hard things. All right, the second prize, maple roasted butternut squash pudding cakes. I bet it takes longer to read that than to eat one, and this looks delicious.
Those were my favorite in testing. Those were my number one. And if you can see the picture, I know, but they're a beautiful orange, and they're covered with nuts and cranberries. They're just perfect for the fall season.
And then third prize, or $100 award, and by the way, $200 for the second prize, the New Year's Day sauerkraut. So you're kicking off the year well with a healthy microbiome there, eating sauerkraut.
Well, healthy maybe. I think the secret there is that it has bacon in it, and boy, it's delicious.
The secret to getting everybody to eat it is that it has bacon in it. All right, tell us about what the recipe contest is for 2025, Carol.
Oh, is it tomatoes? I have to look at my...
It is.
Yes. I mean, we can't write enough about tomatoes, so we thought, let's just see what our readers are going to send us. I know we're going to get a lot of sauce, but I hope we get some other things, too.
All right. You know what? I have something I might send you. Okay, I think I am. All right. It has to do with tomatoes. Okay, so the 2024 essay contest winners did not disappoint over here on page 248. Also, prizes are given for the essay winners of 300, 200, and 100 based on first prize, second prize, third prize. And as tradition goes, I would like the editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac to read the first prize, which was written by Ruth Davis of Mogadore, Ohio, one of our listening states.
Well, thanks again for asking me to do this. I should have mentioned one of my favorite days at work is when we all sit down and we read the essays that people have sent in, which is hundreds. And so we're just so thankful that people still write to us. So let me read Ruth's entry. It was an uncomfortably warm day as I sat on near-empty bleachers watching my son race bicycles. A few rows behind me, a young family was also trying to watch their son through the dust. With them was another son who looked to be about 7, bored. It was easy to overhear the escalating frustrations on both sides. Then I heard, "What are you going to do with that rock?" "I'm going to sell it." "Nobody's going to buy a rock that you just picked up under the bleachers." A few moments later, I heard a little voice ask, "Ma'am, would you like to buy a rock?" "How much?" I said. $1, he replied. I reached into my purse and got $1 for him. Then, behind me, I heard, "Where did you get that money?" I sold the rock. For $1? Then I heard laughing, encouragement, and praise. No more frustration. He had become their budding entrepreneur. That was the best money I ever spent.
All right. That was the first prize winner of the contest for the best money I ever spent. Tell us what the contest is for essay writing for 2025, Carol.
Ooh, this is a fun one. The best gift I ever gave. Can't wait to hear from our readers on that one.
All right. The best gift I ever gave.
Yes.
And rules are in the Almanac for that. Okay, well, before we go, I want to mention some of the many articles that are found in the new 2025 edition of the Old Farmer's Almanac. The Tortoise and the Tomato. You're Not Chicken, right? Paddling in the Past. By the way, that's about the history of the boundary waters which delineate the U.S.-Canadian border. Farming Smarter, Not Harder. Spilling the Tea, that's T-E-A. Snug as a Bug and a Hug, about the therapeutic benefits of hugging. Plus many other articles, one which was written by you. Carol, that caught my eye right away. You wrote an article for the Almanac called The Trouble with Space Rubble. I didn't know that you're also a contributor.
Yes, I also wrote about smelt in this issue, something that I grew up eating. But I'm fascinated by the asteroids and particularly this Bennu because NASA sent a spaceship to this near asteroid to grab dirt, and they're studying it like mad. It came back last year, and it's a fascinating asteroid. It's a clump of junk, but it's believed that it formed around the time the Earth did. And so what can we learn from studying its makeup? So yes, it's all about that. It's not going to hit us. I'll do a spoiler on that one.
It is
We're in no
not.
danger.
It is not going to hit us, you say.
No.
Well,
yes, we're all set.
You never cease to amaze me, all of the things that you do, and writing and being the editor and running an orchard, and Lord knows what you will tell me next year, Carol, that you have added to your list. But it's been a treat to have you back with us on the Road Show. And so tell us how people can stay connected with you and the fine folks here at the Old Farmer's Almanac till we talk again next year.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me on. We're everywhere these days. We are, where you buy your garden supplies, but we're in bookstores. We're on Amazon. We are on almanac.com. You can find all of our editions, including digital editions. And how can they stay in touch with us? Almanac.com is a fantastic resource any day of the year for all of your favorite things in the Almanac. You don't get those features, but you get a lot of the tools. And many people enjoy our daily newsletter. It's got a quote of the day, a beautiful picture. It's got fun facts. And then we link to really timely articles. So, this time of year, it might be holiday recipes like we just talked about, or how to care for those holiday plants, if you have a Christmas cactus and things like that. So gearing up toward what are people doing this time of year on this day.
Wonderful. Again, that website address is almanac.com. Another big thanks goes out to you, Carol Conair, for being our guest once again this year. Well, I'm David Warren, and I'll be back after this final break to read from the touchy-feely article, Snug as a Bug and a Hug, pun intended. Besides taking a look at hugging among humans, the article also answers the question, do bugs and animals hug? I'll give you the answer after this.
I'm Karen Jensen Salisbury, one of the hosts you hear on the Oasis Network Roadshow. For 35 years, this 1 hour of the day has inspired and motivated you, our listeners, with thousands of stories of people whose lives demonstrate the truth that, with God, all things are possible. It's an hour that you should make a part of your day, Monday through Friday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Roadshow, an Oasis Network presentation.
And we are back for our final segment of today's Roadshow, we being Soundman Tim Maroney, who's been here for how many years, Tim?
Over 30.
Over 30, about as long as I have been recording an Almanac Roadshow every year. I really enjoyed my time again with Carol Conair a few moments ago. And I'm glad you have stayed with us, listening family, because we have saved something really cute for the end of today's program. It's an article from the 2025 edition of the Old Farmer's Almanac, and since I have spoken so much this hour, I have asked my friend and our soundman Tim Maroney to help me out in reading this article, and it's really a history of the hug. And the name of the article is Snug as a Bug in a Hug, written by Tim Goodwin. That was Tim's chuckle over there I heard a little bit of. So here we go. We wrap our arms around others to say hello or goodbye. We embrace during times of joy and sorrow. Hugging is a universal language with many meanings, including thank you and I'm sorry. Hugging is such a fascinating cultural phenomenon that scientific studies have determined just how important a hug can be to our well-being.
Hugs for health. There are no rules as to how long a hug should last. It comes down to what the situation calls for. On average, a hug lasts about 3 seconds. If you want to enjoy additional health benefits, hang on for a little longer. In 2003, researchers at the University of North Carolina found that a group of adults who received a hug lasting for at least 20 seconds from a supportive partner prior to a public speaking event showed an increased level of oxytocin, which has been linked to reducing blood pressure and cortisol, the stress hormone.
Squeeze to please. If there is a sweet spot for the amount of time that a hug should last, researchers in the UK may have found it by conducting a pair of studies in 2021 to determine the ideal length and preferred style of a hug. Participants hugged for 1, 5, and 10-second intervals. The results indicated that embraces that last between 5 and 10 seconds are the most enjoyable. When it came to hugging styles, the crisscross arm method, each hugger has one arm low and one arm high, was used 64.5% of the time when there was a mix of genders and with 82% frequency if both participants were male. The neck-wrist contact style, one hugger around the neck and the other around the waist, was found to be used more often between two females, 48% of the time.
The feeling of a hug. For some, receiving a hug is not a pleasant experience, as the physical touch of others can cause undue stress. While in high school, Temple Grandin, now a professor of animal science at Colorado State University and autism advocate, developed a squeeze device, or hug machine. Somewhat ironically, Grandin created the machine, which simulates the pressure of a hug without any physical touching, before she herself was diagnosed with autism. To use the device, a person lies down between two padded sideboards that apply gentle pressure. It's widely employed in schools and other settings to help soothe people with autism.
By the way, if you ever get a chance, Tim, to see the movie Temple Grandin, highly recommended. I like the one that stars Claire Danes. X's and O's. The origin of the O represents hugs, as in XOXO, is unclear. But some people believe that in a bird's eye view, an O resembles two pairs of arms coming together to complete a hug.
Hug Day. When the calendar turns to January 21, prepare yourself for a few extra hugs. Started in 1986 by Kevin Zaborny in Cairo, Michigan, National Hugging Day was created to promote the values and benefits directly related to love and kindness through the power of consensual hugging.
Okay, Tim, before we took our last break, I did a little teaser asking the question, do bugs and animals hug? So what is the answer?
The answer, David, is they sure do, but not necessarily in the same way that humans use the embrace. In one example, spider monkeys are known to hug during reunions after spending the day apart to hunt or feed. Many bugs hug other insects, but usually when they are preparing to consume the hug recipient for a meal.
Not the kind of hug I want. Okay, as we wrap up here are some Guinness World Records when it comes to hugging. The largest group hug was 10,554 people who embraced at the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, Ontario on May 7th, 2010. For the most couples hugging, the record goes to 5,730 pairs who gathered in Bergamo, Italy on July 3rd, 2016 to establish that world record. And then finally, the longest group hug. The record is held by Stephen Radigan, Brian Cawley, Nikki Kearney, and Robert Tuomi, who huddled together in Castlebar, Ireland, and remained locked in a group hug for 30 hours and 1 minute on May the 4th, which rolled into May the 5th, 2019. So there you go. There is your prescription for today. Go give a loved one a hug. Thank you, Tim.
And don't do it while you're hungry.
Don't do it while you're hungry. For For Tim Roney and, of course, Carol Conair, my name is David Warren, and it's been another great road show. You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.